It was Sunday, December 7th, 1941. The sun rose radiantly over Hawaii, bathing the beaches of Oahu in golden light. For the thousands of American sailors stationed at Pearl Harbor, that day promised rest. The warships were anchored side by side in battleship row formation, like steel giants sleeping under the blue sky. Life continued its normal course, almost bucolic. But what American eyes didn't see was the immense Japanese attack fleet that was stealthily approaching. 6 aircraft carriers, escorted by battleships and destroyers, cut through the waves of the North Pacific in dead silence. There were 432 planes prepared to sow destruction. Admiral Yamamoto, the mastermind behind the plan, believed that only a devastating blow could cripple the American fleet long enough for Japan to consolidate its empire. The secret was absolute. The fleet had sailed more than 4,000 kilometers in total radio silence, crossing stormy waters. In Washington, the intelligence services had deciphered parts of the Japanese codes and knew something was about to happen. But the point of attack remained a mystery. Most analysts believed the target would be the Philippines. No one imagined that Japan would attack so far away in the heart of American territory. That morning, radars on Oahu picked up a strange signal. 2 operators reported a large formation of planes approaching from the north. But the officer on duty dismissed the warning, assuming they were B-17 bombers scheduled to arrive from California. A fatal assumption. An assumption that would cost the lives of more than 2,400 Americans. The attack was about to begin. It was 7:48 a.m. when the first bombs began to fall. The blue sky turned into a nightmare scenario. Japanese Zeros and Kates descended like angry wasps onto the anchored ships. The deafening hum of engines and the whistle of bombs violently shattered the Sunday stillness. The USS Arizona was hit by a bomb that penetrated the deck and hit the ammunition store. The explosion was apocalyptic. A column of fire and smoke engulfed the ship. 1,177 sailors died instantly, burned alive. The ship broke in half and sank in just 9 minutes. The USS Oklahoma, hit by multiple torpedoes, began to list. Its gigantic hull slowly turned over, exposing its keel to the sky. Hundreds of sailors were trapped below deck, desperately banging against the steel walls. Dozens were swallowed by the sea. The USS West Virginia, California, and Tennessee also suffered devastating attacks. The blue water of the harbor became a black soup of oil, blood, and debris. Burning men jumped from the ships, swimming across the incandescent surface. The screams of pain echoed throughout the port, drowned out by the roar of the explosions. At the airfields, planes lined up in rows were strafed and exploded. Some 188 American aircraft were destroyed on the ground. The attack lasted approximately 2 hours. Of the 8 battleships at anchor, 4 were sunk, and the other 4 suffered severe damage. 3 cruisers and 3 destroyers were also destroyed. The Pacific Fleet was practically annihilated. The attack was a brutal tactical success. But the deepest blow was not what was seen on the surface. That's what wasn't seen. And the Japanese, in their euphoria, did not see what destiny was already beginning to draw. While Pearl Harbor burned, Captain Mitsuo Fuchida, the man who had led the attack, felt a chill. Something was terribly wrong. 3 key pieces were missing. The 3 aircraft carriers of the Pacific Fleet were not in port. Where were the Lexington, the Saratoga, and the Enterprise? The USS Lexington, nicknamed Lady Lex, was en route to Midway, transporting aircraft for the island's garrison. It had departed on December 5th, 2 days before the attack. Fate had placed it hundreds of miles away. The USS Saratoga was in San Diego, California, undergoing repairs. Once again, chance had saved one of the most valuable ships. And then there was the Enterprise, the CV-6, the ship that would later be known as the Big E. The Enterprise was returning from Wake Island, where it had delivered a cargo of aircraft. Sailing toward Pearl Harbor, approximately 200 miles to the west, the attack began. The Enterprise had departed on November 28th. On the return journey, the weather turned. The sea became stormy, forcing the ship to deviate from its course. This seemingly insignificant deviation was providential. It placed the Enterprise in exactly the wrong position to be seen by the Japanese, but in the right position to survive. Fuchida immediately asked Nagumo to launch a second wave to intercept the aircraft carriers. But Nagumo, cautious and conservative, refused. He feared an American counterattack. He mistakenly believed that the aircraft carriers were in port and had been destroyed. The fear of losing his precious ships prevailed. Against Fuchida's advice, Nagumo ordered the retreat. Fuchida would regret this decision for the rest of his life. He knew they had lost the opportunity to win the war on that single day. The Enterprise was alive, and its survival would change everything. It was approximately 8:30 a.m. The Enterprise was sailing peacefully toward Pearl Harbor when the radio silence was broken. A faint signal cut through the waves. "Mayday! Mayday!" The voice was tense, muffled by static. "Pearl Harbor is under attack." Admiral William Halsey, known for his aggressiveness, was on the bridge. When he read the message, his face contorted in fury. "My God," he murmured, "they caught us with our pants down." Halsey ordered the ship to accelerate at full speed. The Enterprise advanced toward Hawaii, its bow cutting through the waves like a knife. On board, the atmosphere changed in an instant. The sailors rushed to their combat stations. The planes were quickly rearmed. The ship transformed into a floating fortress. As they approached, the sailors began to see something on the horizon. A column of black smoke, dense and sinister, rose in grotesque spirals. It was the smoke of Pearl Harbor in flames. The silence on board was deafening. No one spoke. Eyes were fixed on that black cloud. Halsey ordered his planes to be launched for reconnaissance. The Enterprise pilots dove toward the island, but the confusion was total. In that chaos, some Enterprise planes were shot down by friendly fire. It was a microcosm of what was happening all over the island. On the bridge, Halsey observed everything. He knew that the Enterprise was now one of the few offensive assets the U.S. had in the Pacific. He knew that the responsibility on his shoulders was immense. The ship he commanded was no longer just a ship. It was the only hope. As the Enterprise sailed toward Hell, Nagumo gave orders for the Japanese retreat. The two giants were about to cross paths. Destiny would separate them by only a few hundred kilometers. The Enterprise, unknowingly, had escaped death by a thread. More than 2,000 Americans lay dead. More than 1,100 were wounded. The American nation was brought to its knees in a single day. Headlines splashed the tragedy. Pearl Harbor in flames. American fleet annihilated. President Roosevelt declared that this would be a day I will live in infamy. The U.S. was fully engaged in the war. But the strategic reality was terrible. The Naval Board of the Pacific had completely turned. Before December 7th, the U.S. possessed the largest battle fleet in the Pacific. After the attack, the battleships were inoperable. American offensive capability was reduced to almost zero. Japan now had free reign. The Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, New Guinea were vulnerable. The Japanese advanced like an unstoppable wave. Australia was seriously threatened. The U.S. hadn't just lost a battle, they had lost the initiative. They were reacting, retreating, trying to reorganize. What the Japanese didn't realize was that the war had changed. The era of battleships was over. The new era was that of aircraft carriers. And in this new era, the U.S., despite having lost its battleships, still possessed 3 operational aircraft carriers. The Enterprise was one of them. Yamamoto feared exactly that. He knew that as long as the aircraft carriers were alive, the war was far from over. He had warned his superiors. "I fear that all we have done is awaken a sleeping giant and fill it with terrible determination." His words would prove prophetic. The board had turned. The game, which seemed won by Japan, was only just beginning. And in the center of the board, like a king who escaped checkmate, was the Enterprise. December 7th went down in history as a day of infamy. But for the Enterprise, it was the day its legend began. It wasn't at Pearl Harbor to be destroyed. It was at sea, sailing towards its destiny. And in that stormy sea, it would become Japan's nightmare. The three surviving aircraft carriers became the pillars of American defense. The Enterprise in particular stood out. It was present in all the major battles of the Pacific. At Midway in June 1942, its planes played a crucial role in the destruction of 4 Japanese aircraft carriers. It was the turning point of the war. At Guadalcanal, it provided vital air support. In the Solomon Islands, in the Philippine Sea, in the Gulf of Leyte, the Enterprise was always there. It survived kamikaze attacks, torpedoes, bombs. It was hit, damaged, but never sank. Its crew affectionately called it the Big E. The Enterprise received more decorations than any other ship in the history of the U.S. Navy. It earned 20 battle stars. It became a symbol of American resilience. However, as it sailed toward Pearl Harbor that Sunday, its sailors knew none of this. They didn't know they were aboard a ship that would become legendary. They only knew they were going to war, that friends had died, that the enemy was lurking. The Enterprise didn't know it carried on its shoulders the fate of an entire campaign. It didn't know it would be the ship that would change the course of history. But fate knew, and history was already beginning to whisper its name. The war was just beginning. The clash of titans was about to happen. Pearl Harbor was the first battle, but it wouldn't be the last. The U.S. had lost the battle, but not the war. And the Enterprise, the ship that escaped destruction, would be the instrument of revenge. The legend of the Enterprise was just beginning, and his journey, which began on that December day, would take him through the most epic battles in history. He would become a myth. But that, the sailors who were on board did not yet know. They only knew that they were alive, that their ship was intact, and that the war had finally begun. The USS Enterprise, the Great E, was about to write its name in history with letters of fire and steel.